Good day, everyone. I'm Brennan Lafferty, publisher of Plastics News. Welcome to Ask the Expert. This is the first of our new live stream series at Plastics News. With Ask the Expert, this is your chance to engage with professionals to address the current business environment, discuss best practices, and of course, ask questions. This week's topic is the financial market. And we have 3 live streams scheduled this week, dealing first with mergers and acquisitions, the resin market, and preserving liquidity. Today's specific topic is COVID-19's impact on M&A activity in the plastics market. Our experts today are well-known advisors in the plastics industry, Mesirow Financial. Representing Mesirow are 2 of its managing directors, Louis Mitchell and Rick Weil. Louis and Rick will answer your questions after their presentation. Now, to submit a question, simply email pnevents@crane.com, or if you're watching this live stream on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or on YouTube, send your questions through those platforms. With that, I'll turn things over to our experts, Louis Mitchell and Rick Weil from Mesirow Financial. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Brennan. First of all, thanks for inviting us. We're very happy to be here. I'd like to take this moment to tell you a little bit more about our group. We call it the Packaging Investment Banking Group, which Rick and I founded in 2002. We're focused exclusively on M&A advisory for the producers and converters of paper, plastic, metal, and glass, which is used to package both consumer and industrial products. Plastics is by far our most active substrate. It's highly fragmented and actively going through a consolidation, so it creates high demand for sell-side advisory services, which is what we do. We believe we're the first dedicated group to the middle market industry for the plastic sector. We're also the largest. We have 5 senior professionals located in Chicago, New York, and London, with another dozen professionals who support our efforts. Maybe we can move over to the next page. We can say a little bit more about our group. Looks like the slides are not moving, but we'll have a copy of this to send to all of the participants. So Mesirow Financial is owned by its employees. Out of our 500 or so employees, about 200 of us are shareholders, and so as owners, we have little incentive to go elsewhere, offering continuity for our clients. And the next page on our presentation, which you cannot see, lists our plastics transactions since 2000. Oh, here we go. Plastics transactions since 2015. There's 24 total. Overall, we've closed about 150 packaging transactions since our inception. That averages out to about 8 transactions a year in the 18 years since we formed the group. A particular area of focus that I personally spend my time on is M&A advisory to film extruders and flexible packaging converters. So if you look at this page, once you get a closer look at these pages, you'll see a number of the major consolidators in the flexible packaging sector noted here. You'll see ProAmpac, Charter NEX Films, Morgan Stanley Private Equity's portfolio company, PPC Flexible Packaging, and First Atlantic Capital's flexible packaging company, CP Flexible Packaging, prominently mentioned here. We've been involved in the majority of the transactions that accounts for the roll-ups of those major entities. In most cases, we sold the platform company to the private equity group, and we've sold a number of add-on transactions, and in certain cases, we've also represented those entities in buy-side advisory services. Rick, do you want to take over the next few pages?
Sure. Again, my name is Rick Weil. I'm a managing director along with Mesirow. I've been at Mesirow since 2000, and he and I and a few others have developed a great team representing families in sales of their businesses, private equity firms, and in some cases divestitures from large corporates. And it's been a terrific run in many of the packaging substrates. Got a couple slides here that we'll talk through briefly that provide some contextual background on sort of what we're seeing and how we're as M&A advisors navigating COVID. This first slide here tracks the S&P 500 returns since 1964, and overlaid on that are the pandemics that have taken place, and really what the impact has been during those. Clearly, these pandemics introduce uncertainty and volatility and all sorts of pressure and generally bad news. Just prior to COVID, just taking a look at SARS in 2002 and 2003, where there was a pretty substantial dip in the market. 6 months after it bottomed out, the 6-month returns were 16% on the S&P, and a year later, 27%. Looking at swine flu a couple of years later, in 2009 and 10, the 6-month return was 26%, and 1-year return was 38%. So that points to some pretty strong recoveries, and we're on our way to seeing that today. Where, as we all know, in late March, early April, S&P was down, I think 39% or so, and it's made some pretty strong gains in that time. And to quote Warren Buffett a little bit, it's hard to never bet against America, but just thought that was an interesting overlay there. Next slide, please. This presents the GDP estimates for 4 key regions in the world, as presented by Goldman Sachs. Clearly, the U.S. is taking it the hardest this year, with the expected negative 6.2% growth this year, with a strong recovery next year of 5.5%. That's only second to China. It's interesting. I saw another snippet of information that at the beginning of 2020, when COVID was not as prevalent as it is today, but we certainly heard about it, 160 countries around the world reported the IMF positive, expecting positive per capita growth. Late April and into May, 170 countries have expected, negative per capita growth. It's going to be interesting to see how that shifts down the road here a little bit as we enter into summer and into fall. Here in the States, there's been a significant government intervention and liquidity to rebuild the economy. So it will be interesting to see. The next slide, please. What we've done here, and again, I'm sorry if this is a little bit of an eye chart, but what we've done here is we've taken a basket of plastic packaging companies that are publicly traded and charted their performance since 2007 against the S&P. And as you see, it tracks pretty closely. During the last recession, 08-09, share prices declined 56% from peak to trough. And as we look at it today, as I mentioned a bit earlier, they're down only, share prices are down only 12% from the peak, although they were down at 39% at one point. So it's interesting to see the mirroring of the S&P 500 in plastic packaging. Plastic hits so many different industries that it's ubiquitous. So it does sort of, in some respects, perhaps mirror the general economy. Next slide. This is a different take on it, where this is the same basket of stocks, publicly traded stocks in plastic packaging, and measures their enterprise value, which is value of the equity plus the value of the net debt, and how it trades in the marketplace. And again, similarly, as we've all seen, EBITDA multiples have moved up significantly from 12 into 17, and then there was a bit of a dip. But the multiples are down, 12% or so from the peak, but a strong recovery has already taken place. Next slide. This one tracks M&A activity in plastics and packaging, and the bar charts here sort of belie the activity. Plastic packaging has attracted a considerable amount of private equity investment over time, and in the plastics packaging sector is, generally speaking, a very middle market industry, meaning deals less than $1 billion, and in many cases less than 500 million. So when there are $1 billion deals or $3 or $4 billion deals, they really skew the numbers. The left side of the chart shows the deal values, and on the right side is the count of the deals. I think that the most jarring or most notable piece here is what 2020 off to a dismal start. And as M&A advisors, we've seen deals pulled from the marketplace. And I think it's clearly the right thing to do, and as companies, business owners are dealing with issues at their company, making sure people are healthy, not focused on M&A. So it's slowed up certainly through so far this year, and we'll get to what things could look like down the road. Next slide. Louis, I think you're going to take this one.
Yeah. The outlook for M&A during this environment is quite different, depending on whether we're talking about the near term or the long term. In the near term, it's quite challenging. There's essentially a pause in sales of companies. There's a pause because when we're running an auction, it's hard to set specific deadlines and force buyers into hitting those deadlines when they have bigger fish to fry, I should say. They're focused on internal issues, making sure that they have sufficient liquidity, make sure that their employees are taken care of, make sure their customers are taken care of. So in the near term, M&A is of secondary importance. Also, from the buyer's perspective, they also want to wait and see some visibility into the potentially declining financial conditions of the sellers. Also, financing a transaction in this environment is much more difficult than it's been in the past. The banks, for the most part, are much more stringent in terms of what they're willing to lend on, the amount of the leverage that they're willing to put on the transaction, as well as higher financing rates. And also the actual execution of this sale is much more difficult in that significantly limited in-person meetings, buyers meeting the sellers, third-party advisors representing the buyers, not being able to go and visit the plants, conduct typical normal levels of due diligence. So for the most part, for healthy companies in the near term, M&A activity has been put on pause. Now, I will say that there are certain exceptions. In the cases of highly strategic transactions, buyers are willing to, if it really makes a lot of strategic sense for them, they are going forward and doing what they need to do to do the transaction. In fact, we have one transaction that we're going to be announcing in the next week or so that will get your attention. We started the process pre-COVID. I should say process. We talked to a few names, and then when COVID came on, we let the buyers know that we're going to put everything on pause, and everybody accepted that. And then a while later, one of the potential buyers contacted us and said, "We really want the business. It makes a lot of strategic sense, and there's going to be no reduction in value based on what's going on in the current environment because we're looking at this for the long term." And so there are cases like that happening. I should say M&A is still happening, but on a very much a selective basis. Now, over the long term, the outlook is still very positive. For the most part, packaging transactions and plastics transactions, they're in defensive industries. And there's a lot of private equity money chasing the transactions. Believe it or not, there's $1.6 trillion in private equity dry powder that needs to be deployed. And so those transactions are going to eventually find homes. It's also for the strategic acquirers. Overall, we're talking about industrial companies here, manufacturing companies. The organic growth is limited. So in order to supplement the organic growth, acquisition growth is something that buyers will turn to, and get additional growth that way. Also to benefiting from the synergies. So in the near term, outlook for M&A is very challenging. It's primarily been put on pause, but long term, it still looks very bright. So Rick, you want to tell us?
Great. Yeah, next slide.
Which areas of packaging?
Sure. So what we've got here is the result of a study that McKinsey did at the end of March, and it asked, I think, 1,500 people responded to a survey about their near-term purchases in various sectors, which are shown on the left side. And the numbers shown down the middle are it's the spread between the people who responded that they were going to spend more versus those who said they were going to spend less. And, no surprise, groceries, at-home entertainment, household supplies were the only positives at that time. I think if you looked at it today, there would be others in the positive, whether it's takeout and delivery, alcohol, skincare, personal care products, etc. And people are still concerned about their employment and so forth. But I think the picture is perhaps rosier than this portrays. And on the right side here, what was highlighted, which substrates of packaging, what types of packaging are affected, whether positively or negatively. And of a client that serves the pharmaceutical industry, over-the-counter pharmaceuticals, and their business has been performing exceptionally well during this COVID pandemic. So it would be interesting to see what this looks like, as we progress and hopefully get through COVID. Next slide, please. The last 2.5 months of COVID, and me working out of my home and everybody working out of their home, a lot has happened, and we've habits have changed. And what's shown here are just some longer term implications and key trends that will be taken from what's going on. I don't think it's any great revelation to say e-commerce will continue to increase. I mean, that was taking place long before COVID, but I'm sure in many of your streets like mine, Amazon and FedEx trucks are flying through every day, multiple runs. That portends well for flexible mailers, thermoform containers, food delivery. The next one, again, flexible packaging, and the ones we're talking about here are just on the plastic side. And then the increased emphasis on hygiene. I know that's certainly an emphasis in my house, but between rigid plastic, rigid glass, and flexible packaging, the emphasis on hygiene, I don't think is going to go away anytime soon. Really, that's it for the prepared slides. We'd be ready for any questions you may have.
All right, wonderful. Well, great presentation, Louis and Rick. As Rick said, let's answer some questions. And as a reminder, if you want to send some questions in to our folks at Mesirow, email pnevents@crane.com. Or if you're watching this live stream on Facebook, send your questions through Facebook. All right, guys, lots of questions here coming in. The first one's probably the one everyone wants to know. When do you anticipate M&A activity picking up again, reaching those 2019 levels even?
Yeah, 2019 levels are the highest, highest we've ever seen. So whether or not it's gonna reach those levels, we'll see. Activity levels starting to pick up already. Part of it is the public equity markets. The consolidators' share prices are close to where it was pre-COVID. Dropped about 15-20% for a while, but they're now close to where they are. And when we're looking at it in terms of a forward-looking 2020 current enterprise value divided by forward-looking EBITDA, it's pretty close to where it's been historically. So that helps. People are starting to go back to work. So the question is the pandemic, we're going to have a second wave of pandemics? If the answer is not really, then I expect that people will get back to business. In fact, we had a number of assignments that we'd begun, and for the most part, we put them on pause. Mm-hmm. We just don't want to force people into trying to do a deal when people are minding their own business and working on internal measures.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it's already started, and we're hoping. An educated guess is the fall.
Okay. Here's a question just came in. Prior to COVID-19, we were busy with aerospace, automotive, high-tech acquisitions for our clients in Europe. Not only are some of those on hold, like you were just saying, Louis, but valuations have decreased significantly. Order books have been shelved, workers laid off. The question, are you seeing the same here in the United States? And can you see these sectors, automotive, aerospace, high-tech, can you see those sectors coming back?
Yeah, it's a complete, certainly a complete question. And as far as packaging and plastics go, what we're in many cases, and Louis mentioned, we've had a lot of clients who have we've put on hold their deals. Many of them have performed actually really well during this time. There have been a few instances where there's some COVID cases and some hiccups. But for the most part, performance has been really, really strong. If you look at some of the public announcements from some of the larger public companies, they've had a few here and there. I would say, as soon as there's resumed confidence in the economy, and there's confidence in the C-suite, I think you will see hiring pick back up, and whether that's our industry or some of these others, but it may be a slow build from here on in some of these more cyclical sectors. But I can't really comment too well on aerospace or auto or high tech, but just as a general comment on the economy.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Gentlemen, a couple of questions. I'm sure you get asked this every single conversation you're in with someone looking to sell. Question, how will buyers account for the financial impact of COVID-19 when valuing companies?
I'll give my perspective. Louis, you could give yours. I think it's a clearly a great question. If a company a lot of packaging companies are deemed essential businesses, and we've learned that new term in the last couple of months, and have performed very well. And I think that goes to show their strength. Now, if there have been instances where there have been shutdowns or there have been one-off items related to it that have hurt performance, I think buyers have to recognize that. But on the flip side of the coin, if the business has performed really, really well because of the COVID because of the COVID, and there's been a pop in their business, that buyers will look at it on more of a normalized perspective. But we're still in it, so it's going to be interesting to see as some of these processes pick back up where how buyers look at it. But I think it's similar. It's got you look at it, is it a one-time item? Are these negative one-time items, or are they positive one-time items? And they'll look at them from that perspective.
Yeah, so much of, first of all, I think I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty. I think I'm frozen, but so much of COVID's impact on the valuation that really depends. It's company specific. The companies that we're actively working on right now, but we're still doing M&A during the COVID part, really hasn't been impacted. In fact, I would say that a number of cases they're actually doing even better because they're through COVID, we're in the end market. So a lot of it's dependent on the company, what's happening with the end markets. Are they deemed essential businesses? Now, obviously, the companies that are struggling right now, those transactions have to be put on hold unless a company absolutely has to sell, because the buyers are going to want to see what's the ultimate impact in terms of COVID, and then account for that in their valuation. I think the biggest impact on valuation going forward is going to be based on the capital markets. Are the banks are they going to continue to lend at levels they have in the past? The answer is they're not right now, from what we're seeing. Based on the lower leverage, based on higher pricing, the way the math works, it looks like about a turn of EBITDA less than where it's been in the past. However, the companies that the strategics really want to acquire, they're still getting done at the at pre-COVID levels. But overall, I think a new leverage buyout, for example, with pure financial buyers, it's hard to imagine that they're going to still get done at pre-COVID levels because of the leverage.
Right. Okay, well, that's somewhat hopeful information or news. So, guys, I think this question is coming from someone outside of the U.S. They write, "The U.S. is the hardest hit with COVID, and now there's rioting, across the country. Some of this gentleman's clients or ladies, excuse me, are looking to acquire, but they're nervous about acquisitions within the U.S." They're asking for your thoughts on that. Maybe the question is this a temporary situation, or do you think this is more of a long-term issue here in the States?
It's a great question, and as it relates to COVID, hopefully we're seeing the end of it. As it relates to the riot, clearly tragic and terrible what's going on. Look, this is a very resilient country and a very resilient economy, and I think U.S. has always been attracts a lot of capital and is an economic engine. It's the biggest economy in the world. So frankly, I think while there may be some short-term pain or there may be some short-term uncertainty, this is a great place to invest. This is a great country to invest.
Yeah, let's hope the riots are very short-term in nature.
Yeah, indeed, we all are. Another question, boy, we're getting a lot of them. That's great. Have you seen this one on asset-only acquisitions? Have you seen or do you expect to see an increase in asset-only acquisition activity?
Versus, I'll assume that means as compared to a stock deal. It's a good question. We advocate, unless there are circumstances otherwise, to have on behalf of sellers to sell the stock of the company. If the question is implying because of potential COVID liabilities down the road, I don't have a legal opinion on that, but it's always been our, unless again there are circumstances that dictate otherwise, we've always been advocating for a sale of stock, and there are ways to mitigate liability for buyers of stock. So there's rep and warranty insurance, and there's other ways to do it. But I don't have a clear answer on the question, but those are my thoughts on it.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think the question may be getting to just acquiring equipment as opposed to the overall company. If that's the case, yes, I think that's going to increase. Because some companies with certain end markets are going to go through levels of financial distress. Right. So I can see that that form of acquisition increasing.
So Louis, you spoke about the difficulty we're all having meeting, and I'm just wondering if someone is interested in meeting with a potential buyer or seller, are those meetings taking place at all? And if so, are they doing it in this reality that we are using today, Zoom and virtual meetings?
Yeah, the answer is yes. We've been having lots of management presentations and meetings through Zoom. Virtually, we've been meeting. I have to imagine there's going to be a point before any kind of a transaction happens where there's a face-to-face meeting as well. But we're in uncharted territory here in terms of the way we're going to work going forward. Even going back to the office, we've been. Rick and I have been out of our office since mid-March, and we're sort of anxious to get back, but at the same time, we all need to do it safely. So we're waiting to see what happens there. But we've been having a lot of virtual discussions. It's been difficult to get third-party advisors in to evaluate transactions, and they've been doing it remotely. But yeah, at some point, I think we're going to probably have maybe one in face-to-face meeting, as opposed to doing it throughout like we have in the past.
Got it. Yeah, that'll be one long meeting, I expect.
Exactly.
So, a question that came in at pnevents@crane.com: if acquisition targets have been the recipients of PPP, payroll protection payments, will these funds received be taken into consideration when valuing that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I know that there are very defined rules for how the money can be used. And it would be interesting to see if there is a transaction that takes place where a company has received a few $1,000,000 to help. But I think it would be looked at as perhaps restricted cash. I don't, it's a good question. We'll see how that plays out. But I think that there are very specific rules on how that cash can be used. It can't just be put into someone's pocket, either on the seller side or the buyer side.
Yeah. So ultimately, I don't see a material difference. It's going to be, so transactions are valued on a debt-free, cash-free basis, and so the payroll protection plan is either going to be debt or it's going to be cash if it's forgiven. So it's not going to impact the valuation.
Maybe one last question, guys. If I'm interested in selling my company today, how long should I wait before I actually begin that process? What's your advice?
Yeah, I'll go. It's a great question. Look, it's a custom answer. The question should, I mean, I could tell you right now, going to market right now, as we sit today on June 2nd, the answer is no, probably not. But there's a lot of questions to understand about the circumstance and the business itself, what the buyer universe looks like, company performance. So it's not a cookie cutter answer, other than to say, wait a couple months to see how things come out of here. Whether it's, we have to start seeing some deals get done, some more buyer confidence, some more confidence in the economy, and then we'll have a clearer picture of when to sell. There's a 1 to 2 month preparation period, probably closer to 2 months, to be ready to go to market when things look up. And that's, things behind the scenes, but you work with your advisors to be ready, and it's a lot of work to do it right. So if someone wanted to go to market in 2 months, it would take, now would be a good time to start. But I think it's a little bit of a wait and see to see how things emerge.
Yeah, we have a number of clients who began the process, or we're about to begin the process, and then COVID happened, so we're in a pause. But we're using this time to get the marketing materials ready, and because we're so laser focused on the plastics and packaging industry, we've never, in our sell side assignments, we've never really gone out to many hundreds of buyers like a typical M&A auction does. We've always been very focused in terms of who we contact. And so in this environment, what we're doing is we're preparing clients to be ready. And then we may be having selective dialogue with the top few buyers, and just getting a gauge of whether or not they're prepared to pay full pre-COVID prices. And if the answer is yes, we may still do it during this environment. If the answer is no, we're going to wait until we all feel like it's a better time to go. But a lot of that is dependent on the company, the end markets, and the outlook for that specific company. But M&A is still happening. It's not happening to the same volume that happened during pre-COVID, but we're still doing it. We're just doing it differently than we have in the past.
Wonderful. Yeah, a lot of factors to take into account, no doubt. End market not being something we can ignore for sure. Well, gentlemen, that is all the time we have for questions. Any parting words of advice for our viewers today?
Sure. I would say, focus one. I tell this during good times and bad times. I think focus one for business owners should be on running the business. Today, extra precaution is needed to make sure people remain healthy and the company remains performing well and doing what it needs to survive. So I think in the near term here, focus on the business, and then start thinking about M&A down the road as things improve.
Yeah, I'll also add to that comment. So valuations got up to stratospheric levels right for pre-COVID. And so I think it's reasonable to expect that there's going to be a little bit of a pull-off from that. But historically speaking, the valuations that I think it's going to go to, it's still going to be so much higher than where it's been in the past. And looking at the long term, M&A is still a very viable way of growing companies. And so I think the activity level is still going to be strong going forward. I think we're just currently at a pause.
Yeah, a little bit of a hiccup. And as your chart showed, certainly a history of us pushing through and reaching greater heights as these pandemics come and go.
Right.
Well, guys, thanks so much for sharing your insights today. If you would like to reach out directly to Lewis or directly to Rick, you can email them. Their email addresses are right there on the screen. Thank you so much. I know they would be happy to engage with you. So my thanks to Mesirow Financial for their insight today. My thanks to you for joining us for Ask the Expert. We hope you join us tomorrow again at noon Eastern for the second installment in our financial series. Tomorrow's topic is the resin market, and our experts are Mike Burns and Scott Newell of RTI. So until tomorrow, have a great day. Thanks for watching Ask the Expert with Plastics News. Bye-bye.